When I married Rick, I didn't think much about his son from his first marriage. Ethan was away at college, living his own life, and we never really crossed paths. But a few months ago, things changed. Ethan moved back in with us after graduating. He was quieter than I expected. Reserved, polite, but always keeping some distance. I figured it was just awkwardness from having a new stepmom, so I gave him space. At first, I barely noticed anything unusual. He kept to his room most of the time, only coming out for meals. But gradually, I started catching little signs. He wouldn't look me in the eye. If I entered a room, he'd shift uncomfortably. I thought maybe he just didn't like me. Then one night, I overheard something that shifted everything. His bedroom door was cracked open, and I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I heard him talking on the phone. His voice was low, upset. He was telling someone he felt inadequate, that he couldn't satisfy her, that he wasn't big enough. I froze. The words stayed with me. Not because of what he said, but how broken he sounded saying them. There was real pain in his voice, real shame. The next few days, I started seeing him through a different lens. Every time he avoided my gaze, I wondered if it was tied to what I'd heard. Every awkward silence felt heavier. I wasn't supposed to care, but I did. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of him at the pool from the kitchen window. He was alone, shirtless, sitting at the edge, lost in thought. There was something incredibly vulnerable about him. Not just in how he looked, but how small he seemed for someone his age. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more behind his distance. I began noticing patterns, how he always wore baggy clothes, how he rushed past me if I was in the hallway, how he flinched slightly if I brushed too close. It was subtle, but it was there. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with this awareness. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part felt drawn in, curious. Not out of desire at first, but concern. Still, the more I watched, the more I felt the pull. And that, I wasn't ready to admit. Not even to myself. It started with something simple, laundry. Rick had asked me to do a load since Ethan had left his clothes piling up again. I wasn't trying to pry, but when I emptied his pockets, a small bottle fell out. I picked it up. Male enhancement pills. I stared at it longer than I should have, suddenly connecting it to that late-night phone call. My heart pounded. It wasn't just insecurity. He was trying to fix something he thought was broken. I didn't say anything, just folded his clothes and left them at his door. But now I couldn't unsee it. Every awkward look, every quiet retreat, suddenly it all made sense. He wasn't just uncomfortable around me. He was deeply ashamed of himself. That night, as I walked past his room, the door was slightly open again. I heard the faint sounds, breathing, movement, frustration. I kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard, but inside I was tense. Not because I was judging him. Because I felt something I shouldn't have. The next morning, he barely looked at me. I poured coffee and asked casually if he was okay. He nodded without making eye contact. The silence was charged. I decided to test the air. I smiled and said, "You don't need to be so hard on yourself all the time." His head shot up. Confused. Defensive. I followed it with, "You're young. Confidence takes time." He looked rattled but didn't respond. He left the room quickly. I told myself it wasn't flirting. I was just trying to ease the tension. But I'd be lying if I said part of me didn't enjoy the shift, the slight crack in his guarded shell. The next time we were alone, I mentioned the pills, not directly, but in a way he'd understand. Some men think they have to measure up to some imaginary standard. It's ridiculous. He turned red, swallowed hard, and nodded. He didn't say anything, but the silence between us wasn't empty anymore. There was a new current. One that didn't need words. His glances lingered longer. He stopped avoiding the hallway. I caught him looking at me once, just a second too long. He looked away, but the damage was done. Something had changed. And I didn't know how to stop it. It was nearly midnight when he knocked. I opened the door to find him standing there, tense, eyes low. I didn't ask questions. I stepped aside, and he walked in, quiet and restless. He sat on the edge of the bed like he'd been carrying something for too long. Finally, he spoke. "I know you saw them," he said, voice low. "The pills." I nodded. There was no point pretending. He let out a breath, as if saying it out loud hurt more than hiding it. "I never used to feel like this. I was confident. I dated. I didn't overthink things." But she laughed once. Compared me to someone else. Said I wasn't enough. He looked up at me then, eyes tired. That stuck with me. I haven't felt like a man since. I sat beside him. I didn't offer fake comfort or scripted lines. I told him the truth. That I'd been with men who were arrogant, insecure, quiet, wild, and that size was never the thing that made them memorable. What mattered was presence. Energy. Intention. He looked at me, trying to believe it but still unsure. "Do you think someone could still want me like this?" I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, delicate. He leaned in slightly, his breath trembling. I could have stopped him. I should have. But I didn't. When his lips met mine, it was slow, unsure, almost afraid. I felt every ounce of tension in him, and every ounce of guilt in me. I pulled away, not out of regret but fear of what it meant. He didn't protest. He just looked at me like I was the only person who had seen him in months. Really seen him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to." I stopped him. "It's not your fault. You're not wrong for needing to feel wanted." He stood and walked to the door, pausing before stepping out. "That felt real," he said. And then he was gone. I sat there in silence, heart pounding, lips still tingling. I didn't want this. But for the first time in years, someone had looked at me with raw, unfiltered need. And that did something to me I couldn't undo. The next few days passed in a strange silence. We didn't speak about that night. We barely spoke at all. But the tension wasn't gone, it had only shifted. When we crossed paths, his eyes would linger, waiting to see if I would say something. I didn't. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure I could trust myself if I did. Rick left for a weekend business trip. Just a few days. I thought the space would help, maybe cool everything off. Instead, it pushed everything to the surface. That night, I found Ethan outside, sitting alone, a beer in his hand, staring at nothing. I asked if he was okay. He shrugged. "I just feel empty lately. Like I'm always trying to prove I'm worth something. Pills, gym, pretending to be confident, none of it works." I sat across from him, my voice low. "You don't need to prove anything. Not to me." He looked at me, searching. But it felt different, when you looked at me. It didn't feel like pity. "It wasn't," I said. "It was real." We didn't say anything for a while. The air between us spoke louder than words. Then he asked, barely above a whisper, would it be wrong if I still wanted that moment to happen again? I didn't answer. I stood and walked inside. And I left the door open. He followed. It wasn't rushed. There was no fumbling, no desperation. Just quiet understanding. When it finally happened,